The Virginia sun dipped low over Fort Lee, painting the military base in hues of amber and gold. From our modest brick house on the edge of the officers' quarters, I, Emily Carter, watched the world move on without me. My husband, Lucas Hayes, was nowhere to be found again. Once we'd been the golden couple of UVA sneaking kisses under the rotunda, dreaming of a life stitched together by love and ambition. I was the med student with a scalpel-sharp wit. He was the ROTC star, all charm and broad shoulders. We married in a whirlwind, promising forever under a canopy of dogwood blooms. But forever, it seemed, had an expiration date. 3 years into our marriage, Lucas had a new family. Not me, but Sarah Bennett, the widow of his fallen comrade, and her 6-year-old daughter, Emma. It started small, a ride to school here, a grocery run there. "It's my duty, Emily," he'd say, his hazel eyes earnest, echoing a battlefield promise to Sarah's late husband, Captain Mark Bennett, who died in a dusty ambush overseas. Duty turned into daily rituals. Lucas was at Sarah's duplex, more than our own home, playing dad to Emma, soothing Sarah's tears over late-night coffee, while I, his actual wife, became a ghost in my own life. I'd sometimes see them through the kitchen window laughing as Emma swung from Lucas's arms in the base playground. Sarah, with her auburn curls and practiced fragility, would touch his arm, her smile too warm. Emma, all freckles and giggles, called him Uncle Lucas, her voice sticky sweet like the popsicles he bought her. Meanwhile, I was lucky to get a distracted nod when he grabbed his keys. "Sarah's struggling, Em. She's got no one else," he'd say, as if I were the one with someone else. The base buzzed with whispers. Nurses exchanged knowing looks at the hospital where I worked as a trauma surgeon. "Lucas Hayes is practically living with that widow," one muttered during a shift change. I pretended not to hear, focusing on suturing wounds or reviewing x-rays. My colleagues respected my skill, Dr. Carter, the one who could stabilize a gunshot victim in minutes, but off duty. I was unraveling. I'd lie awake, the hum of the base's generators filling the silence, wondering when I'd become invisible. I tried talking to Lucas. Over dinner one night, I set out his favorite grilled steak, medium rare, with mashed potatoes. "Lucas, we need time together," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. He chewed slowly, eyes on his plate. "You're being selfish, Em. Sarah's raising Emma alone. You've got everything, your career, this house. Can't you share a little with me?" "Share him?" The words stung like a slap. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. That's when I started the countdown. I found an old desk calendar in our cramped home office, its corners curling like my hope. I drew an X on each passing day with a red marker, a silent vow to myself. 30 days to divorce. 30 days for Lucas to choose me. Each X was a wound, a reminder of nights spent alone, of Sarah's laughter, echoing through phone calls Lucas thought I couldn't hear. I gave him chances, date nights I planned, movie tickets I bought, but he always had an excuse. Emma's school play, Sarah's car trouble, duty. The base's community center hosted a potluck, and I went alone carrying my mom's pecan pie recipe. Sarah was there, her smile bright as she handed Lucas a slice of her homemade cornbread. Emma clung to his leg, her pigtails bouncing. "Uncle Lucas, tell me a story," she chirped. He knelt, grinning as if she were his own. I stood by the punch bowl pie untouched, feeling like an outsider in my marriage. A neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, leaned close. "You're a saint, Emily, putting up with that." I forced a smile, but her pity burned. At the hospital, I threw myself into work, stitching soldiers' wounds, saving lives under pressure. It was my refuge, where I wasn't Lucas's wife, but Dr. Carter, steady and sure. Yet even there, Sarah's shadow followed. Lucas dropped by once, not for me, but to pick up Emma's allergy meds from the pharmacy. "Sarah's swamped," he said, barely meeting my eyes. I nodded, charting a patient's vitals, my heart sinking. The X's piled up, 20, 25, 29. On the 30th day, Lucas agreed to dinner at Rosie's Diner, a cozy spot off base with checkered tablecloths and the best burgers in Richmond. Just us, he promised. I wore my favorite blue dress, which he used to love, and let myself hope. Maybe this was it, our turning point. I sat at a corner booth, the jukebox playing soft country tunes, waiting and waiting. My phone buzzed, a text from Lucas. "Sorry, Em. Emma's birthday party. Can't miss it. Rain check." My hands shook as I read it. Rain check. As if our marriage were a game he could pause. I paid for my untouched coffee, the waitress's sympathetic glance cutting deep. "Tell your story, Han," she said, sliding me a napkin. "Folks out there might relate, maybe even hit that like button or drop a comment on our diner's YouTube channel. Keeps places like this alive." I managed a nod, thinking of my own story, one I'd share if I ever got the chance. Maybe someone would understand and subscribe to the idea that love shouldn't feel like this. I left the diner, my heels clicking on the pavement, and started walking home. The night was heavy, the air thick with summer humidity. I didn't see the shadows following me until it was too late. The streetlights flickered as I walked home from Rosie's diner, my blue dress clinging to my skin in the Virginia heat. The betrayal stung sharper than the gravel under my heels. Lucas had chosen Sarah and Emma again, leaving me to sit alone at a table set for two, the glow of candlelight mocking my hope. I'd spent months marking X's on that calendar, each one a plea for him to see me, to remember the promises we made under Charlottesville's starry skies. He hadn't. Now on the 30th X, he'd ditched our last chance for Emma's birthday cake and Sarah's grateful smiles. I replayed our UVA days in my mind, Lucas sneaking me into the barracks for late-night talks, his laugh warm as we planned a future of kids and a white picket fence. He'd been my anchor, the boy who saluted my dreams of becoming a surgeon. But after Captain Mark Bennett died in that ambush, Lucas changed. He carried Mark's dog tags, a weight heavier than grief. I owe him M, he'd said, helping Sarah move into her duplex on Fort Lee. One favor became a lifeline: school runs, late-night talks, Emma calling him Uncle Lucas like he was hers. I was his wife, but I was the one left behind. The base's quiet streets felt eerie now, the hum of distant tanks a reminder of where we lived, a place of duty, sacrifice, and secrets. I passed the community center where I'd seen Lucas twirl Emma in the glow of fairy lights, Sarah watching with a possessive glint. The memory twisted in my gut. I'd tried to be understanding, to swallow the hurt when he missed our anniversaries or forgot my birthday. But tonight at Rosie's, the empty booth across from me had screamed the truth: I wasn't enough. My phone buzzed again, another text from Lucas. "Em, I'll make it up to you. Promise." I deleted it, my fingers trembling. Promises meant nothing now. I'd given him 30 days to choose me, to see the woman who stitched soldiers back together, who loved him through every deployment. He'd chosen Sarah's tears, Emma's giggles, a family that wasn't ours. The calendar's red X's burned in my mind, each one a scar on my heart. I turned onto a dimly lit shortcut through an off-base alley, a route I'd taken 100 times. The air grew heavy, the night too still. Footsteps echoed behind me, quick, deliberate. My pulse spiked. I glanced back, seeing 3 figures in hoodies, their faces shadowed. "Hey, Lady One," called voice rough. I walked faster, clutching my purse, but they closed in. Panic surged as I broke into a run, my heels slipping on the uneven pavement. They caught me before I reached the streetlight. The first blow hit my shoulder, knocking me to the ground. Pain exploded as a fist connected with my jaw. I screamed, but the alley swallowed the sound. "Please give us the bag," one barked, ripping my purse away. I fought back, clawing at an arm, my surgeon's hands desperate. Another punch landed, then a kick. The world blurred, streetlight stars Lucas's face at our wedding. I thought of the hospital, my patients waiting, the lives I hadn't saved yet. I thought of Lucas laughing with Emma, oblivious. Darkness crept in, cold and final. My last breath carried a wish, if I could do it all again. When my eyes opened, I was back at Rosie's diner, the jukebox crooning the same country tune. My blue dress was pristine, my coffee steaming. Across the booth, Lucas sat, his hazel eyes torn. Emma clung to his sleeve, her pigtails bobbing. "Uncle Lucas, you promised to come to my birthday." She pouted, her blue eyes glistening. Sarah stood nearby, her auburn curls framing a face of false guilt. "Emily." "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice syrupy. Emma insisted. My heart thundered. I was alive back at the moment it all went wrong. Memories of the alley, the pain flooded me. I knew what came next, Lucas leaving me, walking home, the attack. But this time I was different. Reborn. I wouldn't beg or wait. I smiled, calm as a surgeon before a cut. "Go, Lucas," I said, my voice steady. "It's Emma's birthday. Don't let her down." His eyes widened, grateful but confused. Sarah's smile faltered, sensing a shift. I turned to her, my gaze sharp. "Sarah, you're paying for this meal, and you're driving me home. I'm not walking." Her lips parted, but she nodded, awkwardness creeping into her expression. "Of course, Emily," she said, forcing a laugh. I packed every dish, burgers, fries, even the pie, into to-go boxes, my hands deliberate. Lucas scooped up Emma and Sarah, trailing behind them. The 3 were a picture-perfect family that I no longer fit into. In the SUV, I sat in the back, the food bags warm on my lap, watching Sarah slide into the passenger seat like it was hers. The drive was silent, the air thick with tension. Fort Lee's lights blurred past the base's orderly rows of houses, contrasted with my churning thoughts. I carried the food inside at home, ignoring Lucas's lingering glance. I found the calendar in the office, and its red X's were glaring. I tore the page off. The rip was loud in the quiet house. No more countdowns. No more waiting for Lucas to choose me. This life I'd pick myself. The jukebox at Rosie's diner crooned a mournful country tune, its notes curling around the checkered tablecloths like a fading memory. I, Emily Carter, sat in the same booth I'd occupied in my past life, my blue dress crisp, my coffee steaming, as if the world hadn't ended 30 minutes ago. Across from me, my husband, Lucas Hayes, fidgeted, his hazel eyes darting between me and 6-year-old Emma Bennett, who clung to his sleeve. Her pigtails bobbed as she pouted, her voice a sugary whine. "Uncle Lucas, you promised to come to my birthday, it's today." Her blue eyes glistened, already brimming with practiced tears. Sarah Bennett, her mother, stood nearby, her auburn curls framing a face painted with false guilt. "Emily, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice dripping with syrupy regret. Emma insisted on finding Lucas. My heart pounded, not with the ache of betrayal I'd felt before, but with clarity. I remembered everything: the red X's on the calendar, Lucas's absence, the alley where I'd died. The attack played in my mind, the thug's rough hands, the cold pavement, my final wish for a second chance. Now here I was, reborn, when Lucas would abandon me again. But this time I wasn't the Emily who begged for scraps of his affection. I was a surgeon, precise and unflinching, and I'd cut away the parts of my life that bled me dry. I smiled, calm as the moment before a scalpel's first incision. "Go, Lucas," I said, my voice steady, almost kind. "It's Emma's birthday. Don't let her down." His eyes widened, a flicker of gratitude mixed with confusion. He'd expected tears, maybe a fight like the old Emily who'd pleaded for his time. Sarah's smile twitched, her green eyes narrowing slightly, sensing a shift she couldn't name. I turned to her, my gaze sharp as the steel I wielded in the operating room. "Sarah, you're paying for this meal, and you're driving me home. I'm not walking." Her lips parted, a protest forming, but she caught herself and nodded, her smile tight. "Of course, Emily," she said, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. I signaled the waitress, who bustled over with to-go boxes. I packed every dish: juicy burgers, crispy fries, a slice of pecan pie, my hands deliberate, claiming what was mine. Lucas scooped Emma into his arms, her giggles piercing the diner's hum, and Sarah trailed behind her heels, clicking like a metronome. They looked like a family, a picture-perfect trio, and I was the outsider. But I didn't care. Not anymore. In Lucas's SUV, I slid into the back seat, the food bags warm on my lap. Sarah took the passenger seat, her usual spot, as if it were her right. Lucas glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed, but I stared out the window, watching Fort Lee's orderly rows of brick houses blur past. The base was alive, with evening activity: soldiers, jogging families, barbecuing, the distant rumble of tanks on a training field. The air inside the car was thick, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. Sarah fidgeted, her fingers twisting a strand of hair. Emma hummed a nursery rhyme, oblivious. Lucas's hands gripped the wheel too tightly. When we reached our house, I stepped out without a word, the food bags in hand. Lucas opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, but I didn't wait. I walked up the path, the porch light casting my shadow long and sharp. The house felt hollow inside, and the refrigerator's hum was a lonely soundtrack. I set the food on the counter and headed to the office, where the desk calendar sat, its red X's glaring like open wounds. 30 days of hoping Lucas would choose me, 30 days of being invisible. In my past life, I'd let those X's define me, counting down to a divorce I thought would free me. It hadn't. It had led to that alley, to darkness. I gripped the calendar, my fingers trembling with the weight of memory. The attack flashed again, pain, fear, the cold certainty of death. But I was here now, alive, with a chance to rewrite the ending. I tore the page off the rip, echoing in the quiet room. The X's fluttered to the floor, a relic of a life I wouldn't relive. No more countdowns, no more waiting for Lucas to see me. This time, I'd choose myself. I moved to the kitchen, unpacking the dinner food. The smell of burgers filled the air, a small victory. I ate alone, savoring each bite, and the pie's sweetness reminded me that I could still find joy. Fort Lee's lights twinkled outside a community bound by duty and sacrifice. I was part of it, Dr. Carter, the trauma surgeon, not just Lucas's wife. Tomorrow I'd go to the hospital, lose myself in saving lives, and start rebuilding the woman I'd forgotten. Lucas could have Sarah and Emma. I had myself, and that was enough. The Fort Lee hospital buzzed with controlled chaos, the antiseptic tang sharp in the air. I moved through the trauma ward, my white coat a second skin, my hand steady as I sutured a soldier's lacerated arm. "Nice work, Dr. Carter," Nurse Ramirez said, her eyes crinkling above her mask. "You're a machine today." I nodded, a faint smile tugging at my lips. I was in control, not the ghost I'd been at home. The operating room was my sanctuary, where heartbeats mattered more than heartbreaks. Last night Lucas came home late, and the front door creak woke me. He stood by the bed, his silhouette framed by moonlight. "Emily will reschedule that dinner," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. I kept my back to him, my eyes fixed on the wall. "It doesn't matter," I said, my tone flat, echoing the indifference I'd learned in my reborn life. He lingered, waiting for the old Emily to soften, to forgive. She was gone, buried in that alley with the red X's. I closed my eyes, letting the silence swallow his presence. Morning broke over Fort Lee, the base waking to Revelle's distant call. I was up before Lucas, brewing coffee in our quiet kitchen. He emerged hair-tousled, wearing the UVA sweatshirt I used to steal on chilly nights. "I took the day off," he said, his smile tentative, almost boyish. "Let's make up for yesterday. I made breakfast." He gestured to a plate of golden pancakes stacked high with a side of bacon. My stomach twisted. Pancakes were Sarah's favorite, not mine. I'd always preferred oatmeal, warm and straightforward, like my mom used to make. He hadn't noticed. I remembered a morning in my past life when Lucas packed those same pancakes into a container and drove them to Sarah's duplex. "She's had a rough week," he'd said, oblivious to my clenched jaw. Now reborn, I saw it clearly. His gestures weren't for me. They were for his guilt, for the image of a husband he no longer was. I pushed the plate away. "Take it to Sarah," I said, my voice cool. "She hasn't eaten, has she?" "You've got the day off, spend it with her." His face fell, the smile crumbling. That's not," he started, but I was already grabbing my keys. "Save it, Lucas," I said, heading for the door. His stunned silence followed me, a shadow I left behind. I drove to the hospital, the Virginia sun climbing, casting long rays over Fort Lee's training fields. The base was a world of order soldiers drilling Humvees, rumbling families waving from porches. But my world was fracturing, and I was done holding it together. At the hospital, I dove into work, the rhythm of trauma care grounding me. A car accident victim came in, his leg, mangled, pulse weak. I called orders, and my voice was sharp. "Start an IV stat. Please get me a trauma panel." My team moved like clockwork, and we stabilized him. His wife's grateful tears a quiet reward. Between cases, I grabbed coffee in the break room where Dr. Patel, a fellow surgeon, clapped my shoulder. "You're on fire, Emily. Ever think about teaching? The residents could learn from you." I smiled, the idea sparking something. Maybe I could mentor and build something beyond this broken marriage. In the afternoon, Lucas texted, "Can we talk tonight? Rosie's again, just us." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. I'd have jumped at the chance in my past life, hoping for a scrap of the old Lucas. Now I saw the pattern. His promises were always broken, and followed by Sarah's shadow. I typed back, "Busy with patients another time." I hit send and turned my phone off, focusing on a chart. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a steady hum that drowned out the ache in my chest. As my shift ended, I lingered in the locker room, splashing water on my face. The mirror showed a woman I was starting to recognize again, Dr. Carter, not just Mrs. Hayes. I thought of our UVA days, Lucas sneaking me into his dorm, whispering dreams of a house kids a life together. Those dreams had crumbled under his duty to Sarah, a debt he paid with my heart. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was reborn, and every step I took was mine to choose. I stepped outside, the evening air cool against my skin. Fort Lee's lights twinkled, a reminder of my life here, patience to save colleagues who respected me, a future I could shape. Lucas's promises and guilt were hollow, like the man he'd become. I climbed into my car, the engine's rumble a pledge of my own. Tomorrow I'd keep building, keep healing. Lucas could chase Sarah's tears. I was chasing myself. The Fort Lee hospital pulsed with urgency, its fluorescent lights casting stark shadows on the linoleum floors. Emily Carter, moved through the trauma ward, my white coat a shield against the chaos of my personal life. The antiseptic sting in the air grounded me as I reviewed a chart, my pen scratching notes on a soldier's fractured femur. Dr. Carter, or 3, is prepped. Nurse Ramirez called, her voice steady despite the morning's frenzy. I nodded, tying my surgical mask with practiced ease. Here, I wasn't Lucas Hayes's neglected wife. I was Dr. Carter, trauma surgeon who held life together when it threatened to unravel. My marriage to Lucas was a wound I'd stopped trying to stitch. In my past life, I'd died in an alley after he ditched me for Sarah Bennett's daughter's birthday, a betrayal that still burned in my reborn memory. I'd torn up the divorce countdown calendar, choosing myself over his empty promises. Last night, he'd tried again, offering a rescheduled dinner, his voice thick with guilt. It doesn't matter, I'd told him, turning away. This morning, his pancakes, Sarah's favorite, not mine, had only deepened my resolve. I'd left him in our kitchen, his UVA sweatshirt a relic of a love we'd lost. At the hospital, I thrived. A gunshot victim rolled in, his vitals crashing. BP's dropping 80 over 50, a nurse shouted. I took charge, my voice cutting through the chaos. Push fluids, get me 2 units of O-neg. My hands moved with precision, clamping a bleed, stabilizing his pulse. The soldier's eyes fluttered open, grateful. Thank you, Doc, he rasped. I gave a curt nod, adrenaline fading into quiet pride. This was my world, sutures and scalpels, not Lucas's hollow gestures. Between cases, I grabbed coffee in the break room, and the hum of the vending machine was a brief reprieve. Dr. Patel, a neurosurgeon, joined me, his warm brown eyes crinkling. Emily, you're a machine. Ever consider teaching? The residents need someone like you. I sipped my coffee, the idea sparking. Mentoring could be a new chapter, a way to build beyond the wreckage of my marriage. Maybe, I said, smiling faintly. Got enough on my plate for now. As I returned to the ward, a familiar figure stepped through the doors, Captain Nathan Brooks, the base's enigmatic war hero. Tall, bronzed, and broad-shouldered, he carried himself with a quiet intensity, his military uniform crisp despite the faint limp in his step. His dark eyes met mine briefly before dropping to the floor. He said Dr. Carter needs a refill, his voice gruff, almost reluctant. I knew his file, orphaned, raised in rural Virginia, climbed the ranks through brutal combat, left with a leg injury that never fully healed. Rumor had it he'd lost his wife last year, leaving him more isolated than ever. The base called him a glacier cold, untouchable except for the rare smiles he'd once shared with her. Same meds, I asked, flipping open his chart. He nodded, his jaw tight. Yeah, legs acting up. I scribbled the prescription, my pen pausing as I studied him. Nathan was a mystery. His visits were frequent, but his words were few. In my past life, our interactions never exceeded this 2 sentences, a nod, a quick exit. Yet something about him tugged at me, a shadow of familiarity I couldn't place. I handed him the slip, our fingers brushing. Take care, Captain, I said. He gave a curt nod, his boots clicking as he left fluid despite the limp. I watched him go, the hospital's bustle fading into the background. Nathan's file noted his heroics medals for Valor scars from battles and solitude. The base whispered about his wife, how they'd seemed perfect together, her death shutting him off from the world. I wondered about her, about the man who carried such loss. My own loss, Lucas. Our UVA dreams felt different, chosen rather than taken. I shook off the thought, diving back into work. A new patient arrived with a broken collarbone from a training mishap. I focused my hands steady, my heart locked away. As my shift ended, I lingered in the locker room, washing the day's tension from my hands. The mirror reflected a woman reclaiming herself, Dr. Carter, not just Mrs. Hayes. Lucas's pancakes and promises were ghosts of a life I'd left behind. I stepped outside, the Virginia dusk painting the sky in purples and golds. Fort Lee's training fields hummed with activity soldiers silhouetted against the horizon. I climbed into my car and the engine rumbled with a promise of control. Tomorrow, I'd keep saving lives, keep building. Lucas could chase Sarah's tears. I was chasing my own strength. The Fort Lee evening was warm, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and diesel from the training fields. I pedaled my old cruiser bike toward the hospital's bike shed, my white coat folded in the basket. My shift had ended, but Lucas's text from earlier burned in my mind, Rosie's tonight, just us. I'd ignored it, knowing Sarah Bennett and her daughter Emma would somehow appear as they always did. In my past life, I'd have gone to the diner, hoping for a scrap of the Lucas I'd loved at UVA, his laugh, his hand in mine under the stars. Now, reborn, I saw his promises for what they were, hollow shadowed by Sarah's auburn curls and Emma's pigtails. I locked my bike, the hospital's lights glowing behind me. My work as a trauma surgeon had been my refuge today, each suture a step away from Lucas's betrayal. I'd stabilized a soldier, earned Dr. Patel's praise, and even considered mentoring residents. but the weight of my past life lingered the alley the attack the red X's I'd torn away. I was done waiting for Lucas to choose me, but the ache of our lost love still whispered. As I turned to head home, a familiar SUV pulled up Lucas's, its engine idling. He leaned out the window, his hazel eyes pleading. "Em, come to Rosie's. We need to talk." Before I could answer, the passenger door opened and Sarah stepped out, Emma in her arms. Sarah's smile was saccharine, her voice a practiced coo. "Emily, join us, the more the merrier." Emma giggled, clutching a stuffed bunny. "Uncle Lucas, tell me a story," she chirped. The scene was a knife to my chest, Lucas's family, the one I didn't fit into. I tugged the corner of my lips into a smirk. I said, "Enjoy your family time, Lucas," turning back to my bike. Sarah's eyes flashed with smugness, but before I could unlock the chain, a jeep screeched to a stop beside me. Captain Nathan Brooks leaned out, his dark eyes glinting under the streetlights. "Dr. Carter, my leg's acting up. Got anything for the pain?" His voice was gruff, but there was a spark in his gaze, a timing too perfect to be chance. My pulse quickened. In my past life, Nathan's visits were routine prescriptions, no chatter. Now I saw an opportunity. Lucas had justified his time with Sarah as a duty to a fallen comrade. Why couldn't I do the same for the base's lonely war hero, Nathan? I glanced at Lucas, his jaw tight, then at Sarah, her smile faltering. "Sure, Captain," I said, climbing into Nathan's jeep. "Let's check it out." Nathan hit the gas and we peeled away, leaving Lucas staring, his hands clenched. The jeep's interior smelled of leather and pine air freshener, a stark contrast to Lucas's SUV cluttered with Emma's toys. I stole a glance at Nathan, his profile sharp against the dusk. "Legs bad?" I asked, probing. He shrugged, one hand on the wheel. "Bad enough. Just need you to take a look." His tone was casual, but his eyes flicked to me, a hint of something amusement intent. I remembered his file, orphaned, battle-scarred, supposedly widowed. The base called him a glacier, but this felt like a crack in the ice. We drove in silence, Fort Lee's lights fading into the distance. I thought of Lucas's duty to Sarah, how he'd used it to excuse late nights, missed anniversaries. I'd swallowed the hurt in my past life, believing his heart would return. I saw the parallel, Nathan alone nursing an old wound. If Lucas could play savior, so could I. But Nathan's limp at the hospital had seemed inconsistent, his stride too fluid for chronic pain. Was he playing me, or was I reading too much into it? He pulled up to a modest base house, its porch light flickering. "Here," he said, stepping out with a slight wince. I followed, my doctor's instincts kicking in. "Let's see the leg," I said, keeping my tone professional. Inside the house was sparse military medals on a shelf, a worn couch, no trace of the wife the base gossiped about. Nathan sat rolling up his pant leg to reveal a scarred shin, the tissue gnarled from old shrapnel. "Hurts most nights," he said, his voice low, almost vulnerable. I knelt, examining the scar, but my mind raced. His timing at the hospital and his quick offer of a ride felt calculated, like he'd known Lucas was there. I glanced up, catching his eyes, dark and unreadable. "You sure it's just the leg?" I asked, half teasing. He smirked just for a second, before his face settled back into stoicism. "Just the leg, Doc." I nodded, writing a prescription, but doubt lingered. Nathan Brooks was no ordinary patient, and I was no ordinary doctor, not anymore. As I stood to leave, Lucas's SUV roared up outside, headlights glaring. He stormed to the door, his face dark. "Emily, what the hell? You're with him now." His voice was sharp, laced with jealousy I'd never seen. I crossed my arms, my reborn resolve stealing me. "Like you with Sarah, Lucas duty, right?" His mouth opened, but no words came. Nathan watched, silent, his smirk gone, but his eyes sharp. I turned back to him, handing over the prescription. "Take these, Captain. I'll check in soon." I walked past Lucas, my heart steady, leaving his anger in the dust. The Virginia dawn broke over Fort Lee, casting a soft glow on the base's brick houses and training fields. Emily Carter stood in my kitchen, the coffee maker's gurgle a quiet counterpoint to the storm in my mind. Last night, Captain Nathan Brooks had driven me away from Lucas Hayes's latest betrayal, another dinner promise broken by Sarah Bennett and her daughter Emma's appearance. Lucas's jealousy had flared when he found me at Nathan's house, my retort, "Like you, with Sarah silencing him." I'd seen a crack in Nathan's stoic facade, his leg injury seeming less severe than his file claimed. Was he playing me, or was I seeing shadows where there were none? As a trauma surgeon, I was trained to spot patterns, cut through chaos, and find truth. Lucas's pattern was clear, choosing Sarah, the widow of his fallen comrade, over me, his wife. His duty to her, born from a battlefield promise to Captain Mark Bennett, had eroded our UVA-sparked love. In my past life, that neglect led to my death in an alley after a forsaken dinner. Reborn, I'd torn up the divorce countdown calendar, choosing myself. But Nathan, war hero, orphaned, supposedly widowed, intrigued me. If Lucas could play savior, why couldn't I? I drove to the hospital, the base waking to the distant call of reveille. My shift was relentless. A soldier with a concussion, a fractured pelvis from a training mishap. Dr. Carter, you're a lifesaver, a nurse said as I stabilized a patient. I nodded, my focus sharp, but Nathan's file lingered in my thoughts. His visits were frequent and his limp was inconsistent. The base whispered of his loss, his wife gone to cancer, but his eyes held a spark, not grief. I decided to test him. At his next appointment, Nathan walked in his uniform, crisp, his dark eyes meeting mine briefly. He said, "Need a refill?" Dr. Carter said, his voice gruff but softer than usual. I flipped open his chart, my pen poised. "Pharmacy's out of your meds," I lied, keeping my tone casual. "We'll need to wait a few days." His brows furrowed, but his eyes stayed calm, almost amused. "What now?" he asked, leaning back. I bit my lip, feigning concern. "Does it hurt a lot? If it's bearable, you could wait." He paused, then said, "Hurts bad, Doc." His voice was low, a hint of vulnerability that felt rehearsed. I pushed further. "If it's urgent, I'll deliver the meds myself. What's your address?" He didn't hesitate, pulling a pen from his pocket and scribbling on a notepad. "Here," he said, handing it over. "I'll be waiting, Dr. Carter." His fingers brushed mine, deliberate, his gaze holding mine a second too long. I nodded, tucking the paper away, my pulse quickening. The base's gossip mill had painted Nathan a glacier, but this felt like a calculated thaw. That evening I drove to his house, a modest single story on the base's edge. The porch light flickered, casting shadows on military medals displayed through the window. Nathan opened the door, wincing as he leaned on the frame. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice soft, almost fragile. I stepped inside, the air smelling of wood polish and coffee. "Let's see the leg," I said, professional but curious. He sat on a worn couch, rolling up his pant leg to reveal a gnarled scar, shrapnel old but brutal. "Hurts most nights," he said, his eyes dropping, a flicker of pain crossing his face. I knelt, examining the scar, my fingers tracing the raised tissue. It was real, but his wince seemed exaggerated, his movements too fluid for chronic pain. "You're managing okay?" I asked, probing. He nodded, then leaned closer. "It's worse alone, Doc. Been tough since—" He trailed off, the widow myth hanging unspoken. I stood, handing him a placebo I'd swapped for his usual meds, a test. "Take these for now," I said. "I'll check back." Before I could leave, Lucas's SUV screeched up outside. He stormed to the door, his face dark with fury. "Emily, what are you doing here?" he demanded, his hazel eyes blazing. I crossed my arms, my reborn resolve a shield. "Helping a patient, Lucas. Like you helped Sarah. Duty, right?" His jaw clenched, but he had no answer. Nathan watched, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp, like he'd planned this moment. I turned to him. "Rest that leg, Captain. I'll follow up." I walked past Lucas, my steps steady, leaving his anger behind. As I drove home, Fort Lee's lights twinkled the base, a world of order amid my chaos. Nathan's vulnerability felt like a hook, but his timing showing up when Lucas did suggested intent. I was a surgeon, not a fool. Yet his scars, his solitude tugged at me. Lucas's duty had broken us. Maybe mine could rebuild me. I parked and the night air was cool against my skin. Tomorrow I'd keep cutting through the chaos of patients, Nathan and myself. The Fort Lee Hospital was a blur of activity, and the trauma ward's rhythm was my lifeline. Emily Carter moved through rounds, my hands steady as I set a soldier's broken arm. "You're a rock, Dr. Carter," Dr. Patel said, his smile warm. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. Last night I'd left Lucas Hayes fuming at Nathan Brooks's house, my retort about his duty to Sarah Bennett cutting deep. In my past life, Lucas's neglect had led to my death in an alley, reborn. I was done with his promises. Nathan the base's war hero was a new puzzle, his leg injury questionable, his vulnerability a lure I couldn't quite trust. My shift ended late and the Virginia sky was a deep indigo. I stepped outside, expecting my bike, but Lucas's SUV idled nearby. He leaned out, his hazel eyes, red-rimmed, desperate. "Emily's at Rosie's tonight. Just us, I swear." I hesitated, the old Emily stirring. She'd loved his college boy charm, his UVA dreams of a life together. But Sarah's shadow loomed. Before I could answer, Sarah emerged from the passenger seat, Emma clutching her hand. Emily, join us. Sarah cooed, her auburn curls bouncing, her smile a mask. It's more fun with everyone. Emma, 6 and freckled, waved her stuffed bunny. Uncle Lucas play, she chirped. My stomach twisted. The pattern was unshakable, Lucas's promises, Sarah's intrusion. I smirked, my reborn resolve hardening. Have fun, Lucas. You've got your family. I turned to the bike shed, but Sarah grabbed my arm, her eyes red, playing the victim. Emily, do you hate me? I'll leave if you want. Her voice trembled, a performance for Lucas. He fell for it, his face softening. Don't be like this, he said, his tone sharp with blame. It's just dinner. Before I could retort, a jeep roared up Nathan Brooks, his dark eyes glinting under the streetlights. Dr. Carter, legs killing me. Got anything? His timing was uncanny, his voice gruff but laced with intent. I saw my chance echoing Lucas's duty. Sure, Captain, I said, climbing into the jeep. Lucas's jaw dropped, his hands clenching. Sarah's smile froze, her grip on Emma tightening. Nathan hit the gas and we sped off, Fort Lee's lights blurring past. The jeep's interior was warm, smelling of leather and pine. I glanced at Nathan, his profile sharp, his hands steady on the wheel. Legs that bad? I asked, testing him. He smirked just for a second. Bad enough, Doc. I leaned back, my mind racing. Nathan's file listed shrapnel scars, but his stride at his house had been too smooth. His timely rescues twice now when Lucas was near felt orchestrated. Was he using me to provoke Lucas, or was there more? We reached his house, the porch light casting a soft glow. Inside, he sank onto the couch, wincing as he rolled up his pant leg. The scar was real, but his pain seemed exaggerated. Check it, please, he said, his voice soft, almost pleading. I knelt, probing the tissue, but my instinct screamed, he's playing you. I stood about to call him out when my phone rang, Nathan's number somehow in my contacts. Dr. Carter, painkillers, he said, his voice weak over the line. I'm hurting badly. Can you come now? I frowned, confused. I'm already here. He hung up his face, pale beads of sweat on his brow. I spotted an empty pill bottle on the coffee table, a full pack gone. My heart sank. Nathan, how many did you take? He mumbled. Too many. Couldn't sleep. Panic surged, my surgeon's instincts kicking in. I called his driver, who appeared instantly as if waiting. We need to induce vomiting now, I said, grabbing a glass of water. We worked fast, Nathan retching his face ghostly. I stayed through the night, cooling his fever with damp cloths, checking his pulse. By dawn, he was stable, his breathing steady. As I stepped outside the base, waking to morning drills, I saw the gossip mill churn. A nurse driving by raised an eyebrow. Dr. Carter was at Captain Brooks's house all night. I ignored it, but its weight lingered. Nathan's overdose felt real, but his rescues, his number in my phone, too convenient. I drove home, the Virginia sun rising, casting long shadows. Lucas was there waiting, his face haggard. Emily, where were you? He asked, his voice breaking. You don't love me anymore, do you? I paused, the truth too sharp to voice. I'd have softened and begged him to stay in my past life. Now I saw Sarah's hold his weakness. You chose your duty, Lucas, I said, my voice cold. He flinched, grabbed a marker, and drew a red X on a new calendar. 5 days, Emily, he said, his eyes wet. Change your mind or we're done. I nodded, unfazed. His countdown meant nothing. I was already gone, chasing a truth about Nathan and myself that I hadn't yet named. The Fort Lee Hospital hummed under fluorescent lights, and the trauma ward was a haven where I, Emily Carter, could outrun my unraveling life. My hands moved with precision, setting a soldier's dislocated shoulder as monitors beeped steadily. Doctor. Carter, you're a miracle worker, Nurse Ramirez said, handing me a chart. I gave a tight smile, my mind elsewhere. Last night, I'd spent hours saving Captain Nathan Brooks from a painkiller overdose, his feverish confession, too many. Couldn't sleep, still echoing. His timely rescues, his number in my phone felt too calculated, yet his scars and solitude tugged at me. Meanwhile, my husband Lucas Hayes had waited at home, his face haggard, accusing me of not loving him anymore. In my past life, Lucas's neglect, choosing Sarah Bennett and her daughter Emma over me, had led to my death in an alley. Reborn, I'd rejected his hollow gestures, pancakes that weren't for me, dinner promises broken by Sarah's shadow. Last night, he'd marked a red X on a new calendar declaring 5 days, Emily. Change your mind or we're done. His words, meant to mirror my old divorce countdown, only hardened my resolve. I wasn't the Emily who'd begged for his love at UVA under dogwood blooms and starry skies. I was Dr. Carter, trauma surgeon, and I'd choose myself. My shift was grueling: a fractured skull, a shrapnel wound from a training mishap. Between cases, Dr. Patel caught me in the break room, his eyes warm. Emily, your focus is unreal. Ever think about leading a trauma workshop? The idea sparked mentoring could anchor me beyond this broken marriage. I'll consider it, I said, sipping coffee, the hospital's hum grounding me. But Nathan's driver haunted my days, idling a black SUV like a silent summons outside the hospital each evening. Nathan leaned out, his dark eyes soft, almost pleading. Dr. Carter, do you have time to check my leg? His limp was there, then gone, a performance I couldn't call out without proof. I went, driven by curiosity and something more profound. His vulnerability, real or not, echoed my loneliness. At his house, Nathan spun stories, orphaned in rural Virginia, raised by a sister who begged to feed them. She's gone now, he said, his voice breaking, eyes glistening. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe him, but his stride was too steady when he thought I wasn't watching. Take your meds, I said, handing him a bottle, my tone clipped. He nodded, his smile boyish, disarming. Thanks, Doc. You're a good person. Lucas called daily, his voice strained. Emily, I'm done with Sarah, I swear. I doubted him, his duty to her, born from a battlefield promise to her late husband. Captain Mark Bennett, was a chain he couldn't break. Sarah called too, her tone teary. Emma's sick, Emily. Lucas is all we have. I hung up. Her manipulation was transparent. The base's gossip mill churned Dr. Carter at Brooks's house night after night. A nurse whispered it in the cafeteria. I ignored her, but the scrutiny stung. Nathan's driver was relentless, and I was caught in his orbit, cooking for him when he claimed hunger, checking his leg when he winced. Each visit felt like a step towards something or away from Lucas. On the 5th day, I came home to find Lucas waiting, his eyes sunken, his UVA sweatshirt wrinkled. The calendar bore 5 red X's, and his countdown was complete. Emily, tell me the truth, he said, his voice trembling, tears shimmering. You don't love me anymore, do you? I paused. The old Emily, a girl who'd loved his laugh, his dreams of a white picket fence flickering briefly. But the truth was sharp forged in that alley's darkness. I stayed silent, my answer in my eyes. He understood, his shoulders slumping. We're married, Emily, he whispered, a tear slipping down his cheek. I laughed, cold and bitter. Funny you remembered that now. In my past life, he'd run to Sarah's duplex, ignoring our vows. Now he stood broken, but it was too late. He grabbed a pen, pulling out divorce papers from a drawer. I'm giving you one last chance, he said, signing them. I'm assigned to a mission in Nevada. If you regret this, find me. He slid the papers across the table, his hand shaking. I stared at them, my heart steady. I won't, I said, my voice firm. He nodded, defeated, and walked out the door, clicking shut. I sat alone, the house quiet, except for the refrigerator's hum. Fort Lee's lights twinkled outside the base, a world of duty I no longer owed Lucas. Nathan's stories, his scars lingered in my mind. Was he my mirror, helping a lonely soul as Lucas had? Or was he playing a deeper game? I picked up the divorce papers, my pen hovering. Tomorrow I'd sign. Tonight I'd work, save lives, and unravel Nathan Brooks. The hospital, my patients, my strength, they were mine, and no one could take them away. The Virginia sun dipped low over Fort Lee, casting long shadows across the base's training fields. I, Emily Carter, drove to Nathan Brooks's house, and the divorce papers were unsigned in my bag. Lucas Hayes had left for a Nevada mission, his 5-day countdown ending with his tearful plea and a promise to wait for my regret. I wouldn't give it. In my past life, his neglect choosing Sarah Bennett and her daughter Emma had led to my death in an alley. Reborn, I'd rejected his hollow gestures, pancakes, and promises. Nathan the base's war hero was my new puzzle. His leg injury was a lie I suspected, and his vulnerability was a hook I couldn't shake. At the hospital, I'd thrived, saving lives, a soldier's shrapnel wound, a child's broken arm. Dr. Patel's suggestion to lead a trauma workshop had sparked a vision of mentoring a future beyond Lucas. But Nathan's driver was relentless, waiting each evening, Nathan leaning out with a soft, Dr. Carter, need you. His stories, orphaned, raised by a sister, tugged at me, but his limp vanished when he moved fast, his pain too convenient. The base buzzed with gossip, Dr. Carter at Brooks's house again. It risked my reputation, yet I went driven by a need to know him, truth or trap. I'd invited Nathan on a weekend hike in Shenandoah, a test to catch his act. He'd agreed, his dark eyes glinting with something excitement, caution. We drove west, the Blue Ridge Mountains rising in misty greens. At the trailhead, he limped theatrically, leaning on a stick, his uniform swapped for a flannel shirt. "Legs rough today," he said, wincing. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, but my surgeon's eye tracked his steps, too steady, too sure. We hiked a narrow path, the air crisp with pine birdsong echoing. I let him lead, watching for a slip. Halfway up, I staged my move. Near a shallow creek, I tripped, splashing into the cold water, my jeans soaked. Nathan dropped his stick, sprinting through the stream, his boots splashing. In seconds, he reached me, pulling me into his arms. "You okay, Emily?" he asked, his voice urgent, his olive green shirt clinging to his chest. I stared, my face flushing despite the chill. "You lied," I said, pushing against him. "There's nothing wrong with your leg." He froze, then smiled, his eyes dark and deep. "So you were testing me?" I stood, water dripping, anger rising. "You've been playing me, Nathan. The limping, the painkillers, the rescues. Why?" He looked down, his hands steadying me, his voice soft. "Because I love you, Emily." My breath caught. He led me to the bank, sitting me on a rock. He said, "I've loved you since before you were married," his gaze unwavering. "Every hospital visit was to see you, not for my leg." Back at his house, he opened a cabinet, revealing a cascade of unopened pill bottles, years of prescriptions untouched. "These were my excuse," he said, his voice steady but raw. "I heard the base talk, Lucas neglecting you, Sarah's hold. I couldn't stay away." I stared, my heart clenching. The bottles were proof not of pain but of devotion. "Why not say something?" I asked, my voice shaking. He smiled faintly. "You were Lucas's wife. I had no right." Then he told me about 1995 rural Virginia. He was 12, begging roadside with his sister, their clothes threadbare, their bowl chipped. I was 10, visiting with my parents, and my allowance burned a hole in my pocket. I'd tugged my dad's sleeve, pointing at Nathan. "He's hungry," I'd said, running over with $5, my entire savings. "Buy some food, kid," I'd told him, proud of my generosity. Nathan's eyes lit up and his sister hugged him. "That money fed us for a week," he said now, his voice thick. "I never forgot you." I remembered those eyes, hungry and hopeful, but I'd forgotten the boy. He'd joined the army, risen to captain, searching for me. His wife was his sister, lost to cancer, their closeness mistaken by the base. "I played along with the rumors," he said, "to keep people away. But not you." His risks, faking injuries, pulling me into his orbit, could cost him his rank if reported. The base's gossip was a ticking bomb, but he'd faced worse in combat. I stood, tears prickling. Lucas's love had been fickle, a UVA dream faded by Sarah's pull. Nathan's was steady, a quiet fire burning since childhood. I stepped closer, my hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "Nathan." "I won't forget you again," I whispered. He pulled me into his arms, the mountains outside a silent witness. Lucas's divorce papers waited, but they were ink on paper, nothing more. My future was with a man who'd seen me when I was invisible. The Fort Lee Hospital was a beacon of order. Its trauma ward was a sanctuary where I, Emily Carter, rebuilt myself stitch by stitch. My scalpel moved with precision, closing a soldier's laceration as monitors hummed steadily. "Dr. Carter, you're a gift," Nurse Ramirez said, her eyes warm above her mask. I nodded, my focus unwavering, but my heart became light. Captain Nathan Brooks had confessed his love, revealing a childhood encounter 1995 in rural Virginia when my 10-year-old self gave him $5 to feed him and his sister. His leg injury was a ruse, his hospital visits a year-long excuse to see me constrained by my marriage to Lucas Hayes. Now, with Lucas gone on a Nevada mission, his divorce papers sat unsigned in my bag, a final thread to sever. In my past life, Lucas's neglect choosing Sarah Bennett and her daughter Emma had led to my death in an alley after a broken dinner promise. Reborn, I'd rejected his hollow gestures, pancakes meant for Sarah promises, shadowed by her auburn curls. His 5-day countdown, marked by a red X, had ended with his plea, "If you regret this, find me." I wouldn't. Nathan's steady devotion, born from that long-ago act of kindness, was my anchor now. His risks, faking injuries, pulling me into his orbit, could cost him his captain's rank if the base's gossip mill turned vicious, but he'd faced worse in combat. At the hospital, I thrived. A car accident victim rolled in, his vitals unsteady. "Start an IV, get me a trauma panel," I called, my voice cutting through the chaos. We stabilized him. His wife's tearful thanks were a quiet reward. Dr. Patel caught me later, his smile encouraging. Emily, I'm serious about that workshop. You could shape the next generation of surgeons. The idea rooted deeper mentoring was a future I could build a legacy beyond Lucas's betrayal. I'm in, I said, my resolve firm. The hospital was my domain. I was Dr. Carter, not Mrs. Hayes. Nathan's driver no longer waited outside. He'd dropped the act after I caught his sprint in Shenandoah. Instead, he texted his messages, simple. Dinner at my place. I'd go cooking pasta in his sparse kitchen, his military medals glinting on the shelf. We talked about his sister's courage, my UVA days, and the base's relentless gossip. They're talking Emily, he said one night, his dark eyes serious about us. I shrugged, stirring the sauce. Let them. I'm not hiding, the base whispered, Dr. Carter. Captain Brooks too close. It risked my reputation, but I was done living for others' approval. Lucas's absence left a void not of love, but of habit. I remembered our UVA nights sneaking into his dorm, dreaming of a white picket fence. That Lucas was gone, replaced by a man chained to Sarah's tears, her daughter's giggles. I'd signed the divorce papers that morning, my pen steady, no hesitation. The house felt lighter without his shadow, and the refrigerator's hum was a quiet promise of new beginnings. I packed away his UVA sweatshirt, a relic of a love that no longer fit. Sarah called, once her voice trembling. Emily. Emma misses Lucas. He's gone and we're struggling. I heard the manipulation, her attempt to pull me back into their orbit. He's on a mission, Sarah, I said, my tone flat. You'll manage. I hung up. Her ploy was as transparent as ever. The base's gossip reached me. Sarah told anyone who'd listen that I'd stolen Lucas's attention, then abandoned him. I ignored it, focusing on patients Nathan and the workshop I'd pitched to Dr. Patel. One evening, Nathan drove me to his house, where Virginia dusk painted the sky purple. We sat on his porch, the air warm with summer's end. Emily, he said, his hand finding mine, I never thought I'd get this chance. His fingers traced the scar on his shin, a reminder of battles fought, loves lost. I leaned into him, my head on his shoulder. I forgot you once, Nathan, I said. Not again. The divorce papers were filed and the ink was dry. Lucas's countdown was over, and I'd chosen a man who'd seen me when I was invisible. Fort Lee's lights twinkled the base, a world of duty and sacrifice. I was part of it, Dr. Carter, surgeon, mentor woman, reborn. The alley's darkness, Lucas's betrayal, were shadows I'd outrun. Nathan's heartbeat under my cheek was steady, a promise of tomorrow. I'd sign up for the workshop cook, with Nathan live without regret. The past was a closed wound, and I was healing. The Virginia sun shone bright over Fort Lee, its rays filtering through ancient oaks, as I, Emily Carter, stood in a white dress, my hand in Nathan Brooks's. Our wedding was simple, held in the base's chapel, the pews filled with colleagues and a few trusted friends. Dr. Patel beamed, whispering, "You're glowing, Emily." Nurse Ramirez wiped a tear, her smile wide. In his dress uniform, his dark eyes warm, Nathan squeezed my hand as we vowed to love, honor, and cherish. The base's gossip mill had quieted, replaced by nods of respect, Dr. Carter and Captain Brooks, a new power couple forged in resilience. In my past life, Lucas Hayes's neglect choosing Sarah Bennett and her daughter Emma had led to my death in an alley. Reborn. I'd rejected his hollow promises, signed his divorce papers without a backward glance. Nathan's love, sparked in 1995 when I gave him $5 as a hungry boy, had anchored me. His deception, faking a leg injury to see me, had risked his rank, but his honesty in Shenandoah, his cabinet of untouched pills, proved a devotion Lucas never matched. I'd chosen Nathan not out of revenge, but because he saw me scars. The hospital was my kingdom. I'd launched the trauma workshop, mentoring residents with a fire I hadn't felt since UVA. "You're a natural, Dr. Carter," a young doctor said, her eyes bright as we practiced sutures. I smiled, thinking of the girl who'd given Nathan $5, proud of her generosity. That girl was still in me, building a legacy. Nathan joined me some evenings, bringing coffee. His quiet presence was a comfort. We cooked together pasta, oatmeal, my mom's pecan pie, laughing over his sister's old recipes, her memory bridging us. Lucas returned from Nevada, and his mission was done. I saw him standing outside the chapel at the wedding, gaunt and hollow-eyed. He'd aged, his hazel eyes dull, the spark of our UVA days gone. I caught his gaze as Nathan and I stepped out arm in arm, accepting congratulations. I looked away, my smile for Nathan, for our guests, for the life I'd chosen. Lucas lingered a shadow of regret, but I felt no pull. The base whispered his story. Sarah had cornered him, threatening to report his closeness with her to the brass, claiming he'd neglected his duties. Under pressure, he'd married her, a union born of obligation, not love. I saw them once at the base's community center. Sarah's auburn curls were tight, her smile forced as she clung to Lucas's arm. Clutching her stuffed bunny, Emma looked small, caught in her mother's schemes. Lucas's eyes met mine, heavy with exhaustion. He stepped toward me, mouth opening, but I turned away, joining Nathan at a picnic table. "You okay?" Nathan asked, his hand on mine. I nodded, squeezing back, better than ever. The base's gossip painted Lucas as trapped, Sarah's control tightening their home a battlefield of resentment. I felt a pang not for him, but for the boy I'd loved, lost to his own choices. My life bloomed. I mentored residents, saved lives, and laughed with Nathan over late-night coffee. The hospital buzzed with my workshop's success, Dr. Patel calling it game-changing. Nathan shared stories of his sister, their childhood hunger, and my $5 a lifeline. "You saved us, Emily," he said, pulling me close. I hooked my arms around his neck, my heart full. "And you found me," I whispered. Fort Lee's oaks stood tall, their leaves rustling in the breeze, a testament to roots that held firm. Lucas tried to speak to me once more at a base event. "Emily," he started, his voice low, regret thick. I walked away, Nathan's hand in mine, the crowd parting. The past had no hold. My world was Nathan's steady, loyal mine. Sarah's threats, Lucas's regrets were their burden now. I was Dr. Carter, my wife, my mentor, and I was reborn. The Virginia sky stretched wide, and I faced it without fear, my heart a home Nathan and I had built together.